All right, gentlemen.
Let's get this show on the road here. So what's transpired since August? Who wants to give an update on where they are with the coaching principles, the 6 W's, developing their team, individual one-on-ones? That's been a big focus of ours. Brian, how about you?
Well, my apologies. I've missed the last couple webinars due to either vacation or being out of town. So what I've done in the last couple weeks, well, let me follow up from New York. One of my challenges, or one of the outcomes from the masterminding session, was that I was going to work on giving up work after hours or at nighttime. And I say since New York, I've worked probably maybe 6 nights, 7, so only a handful of evenings. I've decided to do my best to leave work at work. So that's been productive, not only to help me while I'm at work, but also be able to separate the two and help my mental state, in terms of being able to kind of unwind at night.
Okay.
Since in the last couple months, so what I've done is I've with Marty, my AFA, who's also my in my tax alliance, I've started a weekly one-on-one with him. So we're going to be talking marketing. We're going to be talking how to leverage the tax alliance program with his CPA. I've got a lunch set up with the other CPAs in his group here on October 30th. So we'll be going over that in terms of how to leverage the program for the rest of the CPAs. I'm doing a case analysis class with my own team on Mondays from 11 to 12, and then we've got some other just marketing stuff happening with Jess, and so I've got a weekly one-on-one with her as well. So that's the quick update.
Making progress. Thank you. T-Shack, how about you?
Well, we've kind of been thrown off of our strategy plan due to the hurricane and Harvey, but that's actually provided some unique opportunities to work together and reach out to every single one of our clients. So, I'm not even exactly sure what I was supposed to be working on. I know the congruence thing, I kind of found working with Greg, I was intentionally incongruent, not congruent. So need to continue to work on that, and the flood has actually made that even more incongruent than what it was before. However, we're still focused on marketing as well, and very excited with some of the things that we are doing and looking to finish strong on the financial planning side of things.
So when you found out you were incongruent, what was the issue and challenge there?
Well, I think it was to simplify and organize and rank what's most important, and then to start taking things off of this chart right here.
So addition by subtraction is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, just totally wiping not only categories but people completely out of my life.
The world domination plan has taken a new turn. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
It's the elimination to get to world domination.
Yes, I like that. It has a ring to it.
Did I make the cut?
Well, my friend, we're looking at each other right now, so I would say you did.
Oh, okay, good.
That's good to know. And if you really want to get on Trevor's good side, you'll send him an espresso machine with like 2 months supply in espresso.
We have one in our office. We've had one for about 5 or 6 months, and I'll tell you, it goes over really well.
Is that right?
Cool.
So you're completely satisfied.
I don't use it. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I only have to go based on the testimonials of my team and clients.
Oh, wow. Travis, he's not a coffee drinker.
He may end up off the list, Trevor.
That's a deal breaker.
All right, who else has joined us? I don't see names, I see guests. I know I'm one of them, but I'm watching it as well as
Bob's on.
Bob Bonfilio.
How you doing?
Are you a long-time listener, first-time caller?
First-time caller, long-time listener, yeah. So I missed the question. I dialed in about 5 minutes late.
We were talking about what's transpired since our last webinar. I think you were at a golf tournament or drinking martinis. I can't remember. It might have been both. You might have been drinking martinis at a golf tournament. But I'm sorry?
That's intentional congruence right there.
Exactly. There you go, Trevor. You got a good role model. How to play golf and drink martinis intentionally. So what's an update? Bob, we've been working on developing people. That's been a big theme since New York City. Working on one-on-ones, bringing the team together. What's been going on in your neck of the woods in relation to those areas?
Well, one of the things we have, when you were here in June, we talked about short-term and long-term goals, and really long-term. We did 3-month goals, 3-year goals, 10-year goals, 25-year goals, and really and they were personal and professional. And Travis took us through an exercise to draw out of folks, what they really wanted long-term. And so we've been following up on that. We even posted some of the pictures people drew of their kind of long-term vision in our lunch area, and we got to know more about where people want to go professionally and personally. So we've put into place, trying to put a path in place for them to get there. So for an example, it came out that Hannah, who in our office does all the forms, she's on the operations team. So she does forms for like a dozen advisors. And she said her goal in 3 years is to have a C in her title, a C that starts off her title, chief something. So we jokingly call her now Captain Hannah, so it has a C in there. But her goal is to be the, Nicole of the future. Nicole's our chief operating officer, and she wants to basically take her job as Nicole moves up. So I think, and then also what she's doing is we have her leading the intern team, and the practice we bought up north, a couple hours away, the operations person up there, Hannah's in charge of her. So knowing that she wants to lead, we've created opportunities for her to do that.
Excellent. So one of the things that we may want to do with Brian and Trevor is we did the exercises we can do definitely on a virtual visit, because I just did that recently, where we had some fun, where we actually drew our future both in pictures and our life as a stock market, where we actually went back and said, from birth till your age now, what were the pivotal points in your life as far as the highs, the lows, the tipping points, the turning points, the low points, and then who were the people who emerged in your life that helped you along the way. And then we flipped it over and said, okay, put your current age down and cast that out 30 years. What's your life going to look like both personally and professionally, and chart that out. What's going to happen by when and so forth. And so that was that's what got everybody thinking in regard to what Bob just said, and then the follow-up has been what he just talked about. When you identify a team member wants to do something, it's in alignment with your vision, then start taking the small steps to get them going in that direction. So Bob, thanks for sharing on that part. Anybody else on the call here? Nope. Okay. So I'm going to continue on our theme today. I'm going to go over some different coaching techniques around, there again, we're developing people individually and as a group. And then I'm also going to talk about, I'm going to give you some tools to use and talk about how we've used them. And then we're going to talk about what to do to get ready for our event in Charlotte, which is quickly approaching. So one of the things I wanted to bring awareness to as you look at the slide is, and we call it coaching skills, we could call this leadership skills, we call this management skills, it somewhat blends together. But as you look to lead your team, we put together a couple qualities here that I really think you need to think about and also begin to check mark in your daily routine as far as how you're leading. So active listening, I think that's very important. I don't know who coined the term, but there's a difference between listening to respond versus listening to understand. Listening to respond might be when Trevor's talking and all of a sudden a thought just comes to my head and I can't wait to get it out. So I've shut off by listening and I'm waiting for him to get that one break and then boom, I jump right in. And so therefore I'm not really listening to understand anymore. I'm just listening to get out something I think that's important. And what happens is that really jumbles up the communication. It disallows you from actually completing the thought and listening to Trevor. And really it shows you're not a very good listener. So, I think we got to practice our active listening and, be very intent, be in the moment, allow 1 or 2 seconds for a pause before we do jump in. I think active listening also means, playing back what you heard to make sure they understood it. Open, relevant questioning. We've been talking a lot during the webinar and last summer together of, what kind of questions to ask and really leading people through questions to the answers. Supporting, there again, it's a simple statement, just let them know I believe in you, I'm on your side, I'm here to help. Making sure they understand that and that you're followed up with actions, not just the words. And then challenging, I know I've been accused of this, where, when you don't feel like someone is maybe bringing out the best or seeing something maybe in an incorrect way or has fallen off their path as it relates to the goals, I think it's very important that we do challenge the people that we lead and develop. And so, sometimes, in fact, I was just on a phone call with a guy who helps run the Youth Football League, and we were talking about a coach who we've approached him several different ways. He just doesn't seem to get our culture. And I said, I think we've been very diplomatic. It's now time to be assertive. And of course he said, I know you're good at that, so you get to talk to him. Okay, so I can do that. I think, it's going to, sometimes you have to be very assertive. So out of those 4 skills, what resonates most with you? Trevor, which one jumps out at you as far as maybe one that seems to be most relevant to where you are in your leadership?
Probably active listening. The example you gave is one that, one of my pet peeves is when I get interrupted. That just drives me insane. And so, but I also think that when I have a important point to make, that it's difficult for me to remember that point and then continue to really hone in to what my wonderful colleagues are saying to me or clients.
Okay, so active listening. Brian, what about you?
I'd say for me, it's probably challenging. It's trying to get the best out of people. Trying to push them, comfortably push them out of their comfort zone, but do it in a way that's I'm not assertive enough when it comes to challenging people.
Okay, so that's something we can work on there. Okay, Bob, what about you? What jumps out at you as most relevant to where you are when you're leading?
Yeah, I would echo what Brian said, challenging. Just making sure that I'm leading people to what their capabilities are.
Okay. I'm going to write that down then. Ben, if you want to write that down, it's something we can work on and add that to our time together in November, is how to be assertive and how to challenge. So I've done some demonstrations on that for our coaches, so I think we can bring that to life. Cool. A couple other skills here. Encouraging. There again, that's probably the praise part. You see someone do something really well. We discussed, spot coaching. In other words, all of a sudden you just see something happen and you deal with it. But on the encouragement side, it's really, acknowledging they've done something well. And so I think that's important. Empathy, it's the ability to walk in someone else's shoes and let them understand that you either have been there or can understand where they're coming from and their situation. Sometimes that's very hard for us to do, I believe, when we're kind of hard-charging, goal-driven, and we see that we put our effort, and then when someone else is not there, I think that's where I see empathy fall off. The generating options, to me, that's just helping people reframe and rethink and refocus. I did a presentation yesterday and we talked about fixed beliefs, which, a fixed belief can be a positive, integrity. Yes, that's a belief I have. But you might have other fixed beliefs like if it's not broke, why break it? And that's one of those anchors that can occur in our thinking and cause what I call stinking thinking. So part of our job is to generate options. A lot of times I think our team members get locked in on maybe one way of doing things, and I think it's important that going back to the challenging part, we challenge them about that, but we also help them look at the situation differently. What would be a different approach? And then the last part is just it's knowing the people that you work with. Do we know what their strengths are? Do we know what their weaknesses are? Do we know where their passions lie? And then are we aligning, their skills, like Bob said, with Hannah saying, "Hey, I didn't know." Bob didn't know until we did this exercise that she had that direction she wants to go. So now he's giving her the opportunity to leverage skill sets to lead in an operational manner by assigning her to run the interns. So. Any thoughts or questions about these four?
It just occurred to me that these are the same skills we use with clients. And oftentimes we get into a selling mode rather than a coaching mode.
Mm-hmm.
Telling versus selling, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So, these kinds of things, I don't know, just apply to that client situation as well.
Okay. Good insight. Brian or Trevor? No? Okay. So let's just be aware of these. Like I said, I think this is kind of a checklist. It's actually a good reminder for me to see some of these things because we talk about this with our coaches about having these skills and being aware of these. So as you're leading day to day, you might want to carry that list around you. The last three here are aligning. And this goes back to like what Bob's example is, he found somebody who wanted to do something. Now we're moving that person towards that direction. Being solution focused, Nito talks a lot about this. He says, don't be a problem solver, be a solution finder. And the context behind that is oftentimes we can just focus on the problem too much. Not because we're not trying to fix it, but how the problem is slowing us down. Let's look at the blame. Let's let this problem linger, and we keep it alive as opposed to our focus just shifting and going, all right, great, we know what the problem is, but now we just need to talk about solution finding. And the last part is modeling. People looking at you and seeing, what are you doing every day? Because the best form of leadership is not talking about doing something, it's actually doing it. So when you look at these skill sets, and you're looking for someone else, Trevor, you talk about your beef around active listening. The best thing that you can do is be an active listener and, model that behavior. And then that's one way of getting people to become very good active listeners. So let's talk about feedback. When we say the word feedback, without looking at the screen, what's usually the connotation that goes along with it? Is it positive or negative?
Criticism, negative.
Criticism, negative. So can you think back, maybe maybe you were a young adult, maybe you were in your sports career, early on in the career, where you found feedback to be negative? Not you giving it, but someone giving it to you? Has that happened?
Yeah.
What was the experience you had with that, Trevor?
Well, specifically for me, when I was a star basketball player in high school, and the coach was so, I don't know, I guess it was old school, but he was so negative to the point of the expletives that he used, it was cringeworthy. And I just think, I just always remember back to that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Bob, what about you?
I had a football coach, same thing. And we had, I remember when I was a junior, we had the best team, and we just underachieved. He just didn't bring out the best in us. There's no doubt.
Mm-hmm. Zach?
My first few years in P1 was write more GDC or you're going to get fired.
Competition improves.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking, Bob. So I'm bringing that up not to relive some bad memories. I certainly can relate to what all three of you said there. What I'm trying to come at this is most people their reference to feedback is references you gave. And so I think a part of our job is to explain to our team members about what really feedback is and the positive that can come from it. And so, I've coached many advisors and, even talked to my own team about, what is feedback? If I'm giving you feedback, please know my intention is always to help you. Now realize I'm human. I may not always get my words right. My emotions may not always be there, but I just want to let you know my intention when I give you feedback, good, bad, or indifferent, is, I'm trying to help you. So I think a part of what we have to do as leaders is establish what feedback is and what's the premise of the feedback, so that as they receive it, you're helping influence how they receive it versus maybe some old connotations that are attached to it. And so I'm not going to hit every bullet point here. The one bullet point number 5, most of us find it difficult to accept feedback that goes against our self-concept. When I read that out loud, what comes to mind?
Most people don't want to get outside of their comfort zone. That's what comes to mind for me.
Okay. Brian or Bob?
I think we're naturally conditioned to that any feedback is negative feedback.
Okay.
And so I think that I don't, when it goes back to the, are you listening or active listening on their side, as soon as the word feedback or whatever synonym you may use, I think that I don't know how much people actually hear what you're saying anymore.
Okay. What I'm really honing on is the word self-concept. So self-concept, I hear what you guys are saying, and those are very true, but accept feedback that goes against our self-concept. The way we view ourselves, we don't get up in the morning and say, gee, I want to be someone who sucks really bad at my job, right? We build habits, we build patterns, we build thought processes that every day, if it was successful the previous day, we think I'm going to follow that. And so we build up this self-concept. We build up this, I don't want to call it an illusion, but to a certain degree it is, of kind of who we are and what we do and what we're good at. And then when we start getting feedback, especially around what we perceive as something that we're very good at, that's when people really have a hard time accepting that. So a part of this is helping people, part of what we're trying to do is help people understand who they are and some of their shortcomings, as well as even when they're good at something, is there alternative ways, going back to fixed beliefs, is there alternative way of doing things? And so I think I'm just highlighting that because as you lead people and you start wondering where you might get some difficulty, I would seek to understand what they think of themselves in relation to the feedback you're going to give. So if it's, we'll use Hannah as an example, and she wants to be a manager or leader, she may think she's a great manager, but we really need to, for Bob, we need to understand, okay, what does that mean to be a great manager? How do you see yourself being a great manager? What in you, what skill sets do you have? What characteristics of it? In other words, take the time to help them understand, first of all, where they're coming from. That'll help you and them establish then where the feedback can go. And then this last bullet point is, I think what Bob and Brian were talking about is, it's just you're maybe avoiding giving feedback or challenging people because you're not sure maybe of the outcome, or maybe you're just not, feeling good about your ability to do it. So I'd ask Bob and Brian, kind of get vulnerable here for us. What is it that what's holding you back from giving feedback or challenging people?
Well, I think that for me, it can be very situational. I think what you have on the screen here is part of it. You're afraid of negative outcomes, but when I get feedback though, that is for me, toward me, that is very matter of fact and speaking the truth, even though maybe it's something I didn't want to hear, it's something I appreciate. So I'm not sure why I have, I hold back, but because I appreciate it when I get that feedback.
Okay. Brian?
My approach, or my, call it, view, is that, I take responsibility and claim responsibility for what I do and my actions and my mistakes. And my personal belief is that people should do the same. I kind of take the philosophy where, I shouldn't necessarily have to show you how to do it. I'm hoping that I can tell you what to do, and you can take responsibility for your job role and function and do what you need to do, and I can correct, as we go along. But, in terms of if you're really messing up or really screwing up or really going in the wrong direction, my belief is that you can take the responsibility to self-correct. So my management style is pretty hands-off because, my belief is that people should be taking responsibility for their own actions and come to me for help if they need to correct something.
And how's that working for you?
Well, I'm sure you can probably imagine.
Well, I'm saying a little tongue-in-cheek only because you're bringing up a great example of, here's a classic Brian Grizzik fundamental of life, right? This is what you live and operate by. And then when someone else is not operating under that assumption, right? They're not operating under that premise. That to me is where the rub hits the road, right? And then, so then when you find that out, what's holding you back from addressing that?
I think it's my concern or fear of coming off too harshly.
Okay.
Well, I think, Brian, when I heard what you said, I would say it's a matter of like expectations. So if people have a certain readiness level to do what you said to do, and some may have the readiness to actually do that, and some may not. And readiness is actually very situational. It's a task specific. Someone could be a great performer, but if they've never done a certain task or a certain function in your office, they they could be very low readiness, even though they're a good performer. But I also think that if you share that with your team and you set that expectation and that vision, I think that then maybe you can expect that, but there ought to be like some interim steps to report to you and say, here's where I'm at, get feedback from that, get feedback to that person in terms of where they're at. If you just say, here's your job and you set it and forget it, you're never going to really know if they're doing the job or not, and neither are they. They're not going to know if they're doing the job or not either. So.
Yeah, I guess what I'll say, or to maybe summarize it better, is that my default setting, so to speak, is not as I know how to lead and manage myself. I don't know, or I've not spent the predominance of my career leading or managing other people. So there's a lack of confidence on my part about how to effectively lead or manage people without micromanaging or being too, heavy-handed, I guess.
Right, and this was something that, way back early in my career, when I was trying to be an FVP, they would send you for these. I had to go to New York City for this leadership assessment, and there was a written part of it, and then there was a kind of a simulation where they put you in a leadership situation with actors and everything. It was pretty thorough. You got to report back. And my feedback was very similar to what you just said, is that Bob leads himself, but lacks painting the vision for his team. So this is something that I've had to really work on and be conscious of over the extent of my career. But I feel like if you ask my team, what's our vision and where are we headed and what life could look like for them in the future, they would have some pretty clear answers now. But it didn't come natural for me because I had the same attitude as you, Brian, is that, hey, I'm doing the deal, I'm working my ass off, and I expect everyone else to do the same thing. Well, not everyone's going to do that unless you share the vision, share what's expected, and give them positive or appropriate feedback along the way.
Thank you, Bob.
Yep. So, I think just an overriding theme there, Brian, is what I'm hearing is just letting people know what your beliefs are and setting guidelines and expectations. And then instead of waiting for the big blow up, managing it along the way to see, the check-ins. Are we there? And are we there is going back to your observations as well as asking them about their own observations.
Okay. I'm making notes of this to discuss during our next team meeting.
Okay. Trevor, any insights before we move on to the next one?
No, I just think that, when you start off as an advisor, at least for me, I never had any interest in going into coaching or leadership. And so it was all focused on being an entrepreneur and building this practice. And so when you get to a certain level, then you've got to recognize that you do have to build a team and lead. And so I don't really have any issues with confrontation or giving feedback. It's how I do it, and just being what Bob said, expectations, how you present it. But I remember that one of my staff members I saw on a follow-up email with Michael, and reading through what Michael's notes were from that meeting, it said something like she didn't know how she was doing because I didn't ever give her any feedback, and that was that struck me pretty clearly there.
Okay. So the last piece here on feedback, and then we'll talk about the whole message model. And bullet point number 2 is very important, because if we're coaching and leading and developing people, we've got to know what what do we expect from them? Kind of tying what we're talking about with Brian there. So what are their performance requirements? What are their developmental goals? And I think that's the heart of what we're really talking about here, is getting, a person who's identified there at this role, but they want to be here, and here's the skill sets they need to learn, here's the proficiencies they need to improve, and then helping them along the way. And that's where feedback can really come into play as we develop people. So those are just some, there again, some bullet points. I think as you look at giving feedback, it's important that we remember those. The last point, I'm going to jump into that in our tool here. So, Bob, I don't know if you remember the whole message model as a part of the Ameriprise playbook.
Oh, yeah.
So this has been a great tool for me personally in working with my team, but it's also been a great way to deliver feedback. Unfortunately, this is the type of tool that we're using when someone's performance and results are not where either they want to be or we want to be, or both. And so, the general overview is, just the facts, ma'am. You want to outline what the facts are as you see, so your observations, how this made you feel when you saw it, the impact, the consequences, not the punishment, but when they're doing what they're doing, how that has consequences either to them, the team, or the clients, and then getting very clear about this is what we want going forward. So that's the overview. And so, if you have a situation around performance, typically people call this the coming to Jesus meeting. Hey, we really need to sit down. We need to have somewhat of an intervention. And that's where the whole message model comes in. And so you really, just like it says, what do you hear? What do you observe? What do you experience? Stick to the facts. I think it's best that you write all these things down. The feelings. How does it make you feel when you see them do this? How does this make you feel about that person when they're doing this? And this is not about, like it says, blaming, ridicule, or shame. We're trying to have a very honest conversation here. We want to make sure that we don't let emotion control us or get out of control and lead us away from what we're trying to do. But we definitely want to say, hey, when you do this, this upsets me. Or when you do this, this frustrates me, and here's why. So it's important that we document all that. And then now we want to talk about what would you like to see. So this gets into, if we have a performance issue, they're showing up late for work, or they've been tardy, or they've made mistakes, whatever it is, you got to say, okay, be very clear and be very specific. Here's what I want from you going forward. Like it says, what do you need to change? What do you stop, improve, or continue? And then tell them the goal specifically you want them to accomplish. And then the impact. This is, describe what will happen if the behavior continues. This is where you already told them, here's what's happened. Now you're going to say, hey, when you did this, this had a negative impact on the team this way, or on me, or a client. And then when you start talking about what you want, now we want to say, here's the positive rewards when you're going to do what I ask you to do. So that's breaking down the model. Any questions about these specific steps? Does anybody have a situation where it might be appropriate to use this model right now?
Well, it's funny you bring this up, because I just shared this with a client, actually. He's got a very tough situation going on that he has to share with someone in his family. And I basically taught him how to use this model, sharing that tough message. And I've done this countless times with my team. If someone comes, invariably someone's going to come to you and they have a beef with someone else on your team, and they don't know how to approach it, and sometimes they're expecting you to deal with it. But I've shared countless times with team members how to do this and demonstrate for them how to do it. So it's a really good tool. And you can actually Google whole message model, and you'll find this.
Mm-hmm.
with examples and things like that. So it's a good exercise.